Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, Sharon. We are going to get started in just a minute. My name is Corey. I'm the Development Director for the International Institute, and I'll be your host today. We are more than 100 people we're expecting on today's call, and so we will mute everyone's lines and also stop your cameras just to keep the presentation focused on our speakers this morning. Later on, we'll have the opportunity to ask questions, and we ask you to do that in the chat box. I will facilitate those questions at the end of both of the presentations today. For those of you that submitted questions in advance, we share those questions with both Jane and Kellyanne. If they are maybe a little tangential to our discussion today, we will also work on following up with you after the call. I know there were a few folks that asked about public school policy. There was some questions about Greater Minnesota. And so if there are things that aren't as relevant to the actual discussion today, we'll work on making some contacts after the call today as well and following up on those questions. Looks like we have just a few more people arriving, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, it's 9:05, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. This is the International Institute's ongoing Breakfast Circle series. We do this at the Institute quarterly. This is the third time that we've done this series through Zoom calls. So we had one in August regarding immigration and our immigration services programs in the New Americans campaign. We had one earlier this spring, right in April, right when our office closed down as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the purpose of today's call is to both give you an update on what's happening at the Institute at this point in time, but also to talk about the future, which is it's been really fun to think about just over the last few weeks as the election result has become clear, and we know the future of immigration policy is likely to look very different than what it does today. We've asked Kellyanne Whalen from our national affiliate organization, USCRI, to join us. And then Jane Grotman is back to talk about our COVID response, but also our COVID programming that we're doing at the Institute right now. We know that most of our clients and students are really feeling the impact of both the economic decline as well as some of the challenges that are existing in their workplaces and their lives. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the Institute's response to that today. So to get started, I just want to do a quick poll with everyone on the line. And I think you'll have a chance to see this poll. But the questions are, how would you describe your relationship to the Institute? Are you a community partner? Are you a volunteer and donor? Are you one of our current program participants or former client or students? Are you Institute staff? No previous affiliation, but interested in the topic? It's like we have got a lot of volunteers and donors on the line today. Thank you. Community partners? A few students? Wonderful. I'll just give it one more minute or a few more seconds. Excellent. Well, that gives us an idea of who is with us today. Thank you. One other housekeeping announcement, I made a couple of these earlier. I know that there'll be a lot of questions today. If you have questions, go ahead and enter those into the chat box. And we will work to address as many questions as we can at the end of today's presentation. So excellent. With that, let's go ahead and get started. And we will first welcome Jane Grotman.
Thanks, Corey. Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for their time. I know this is a really busy time for people, and we're just really grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you and to update you on the work that's happening at the Institute. I also want to give an extra welcome to Kellyanne Whelan for being here. Kelly is the policy director at our national organization. So our national organization's in Washington, D.C. called U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. They're critical for our work. We have many partnerships with them. One of those biggest partnerships is our refugee resettlement work that we do. They are the ones at the table with the U.S. State Department, making sure that our allocation of refugees is given to us, and then they communicate to our national office, and then they communicate with our local office and tell us who's arriving and when, and then the important information from the refugee camps so that we're informed so that we can serve people as best we can when they arrive to Minnesota. So that work is super important. They're great partners. We talk to them daily almost. So welcome, Kellyanne. We're really grateful to have you here. So I have about 15 minutes. I'm going to try to be really efficient with my time. I have a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to start with talking about just, our response to COVID as a staff and an organization, and then move into, as Corey mentioned, the impact it's had on our clients, our students, our clients, and how we've responded to that. And then want to give you some exciting program updates. COVID has a life of its own, as we all know, but programs haven't stopped growing and doing the important work that they're doing. It's more important than it ever has been, it seems. So I'll give you updates about that, and that's exciting to do. And then end with just some comments about the future, both in terms of the changes in the political landscape, but also some other exciting things that are happening at the Institute. So I'm going to jump in. As you know, many of you know, the Institute closed on March 16th in response to COVID. As person in administration, we were very concerned about our staff and their safety, but also really, of course, concerned about our students. So we made the decision to close right away. I definitely think that was the right decision. And since that time, like all of you, we're paying close attention to what the CDC is saying at the national level, but also we're very grateful to have such a strong Department of Health in our state. So MDH, the Minnesota Department of Health, has done a phenomenal job. I listen when I can to the updates, and I just think we are so fortunate to have that strong investment that our state has made in that department and such strong leaders in that department. We're so dependent on the advice that they're giving us. And I'm really happy to say that we haven't had any of our staff. We've had a complete COVID free workplace, and none of our staff have been sick. So we're very grateful for that. I want to just talk a little bit more about MDH, the Minnesota Department of Health. We were able to partner with them. We reached out to them and they to us. And we formed a partnership to help with education on COVID for our clients, but also navigation of what people can do when they are sick, which is not easy to figure out. So for any of us, so that we have 3 staff who are bi and trilingual, who are providing service in the languages that are predominant among new Americans in our community. And that has been so important for us to be a go-to agency for information for our clients. So we're really grateful for that. Before I talk about our staff and their response, which has really been phenomenal, I just want to say something that I think is is cause for pause, is that the Institute has employed almost 4,000 people in healthcare, and at all levels, from entry level to nursing assistant level to nursing 2-year and 4-year and 6-year nursing degrees. And those folks are on the front lines of healthcare. And so they are providing service to our community for elders and in the front lines in hospitals. So we are so grateful for the work that they do. I want you to know that we're in contact with them so that some of those healthcare workers have gotten COVID. And so we are supporting them. Our staff call them and support them in every way that we can. And we're happy to say that they have gotten back, have recovered, and have most of them gotten back to their work or back, to their normal life. So we're super grateful for their courage in staying in this work, which is really, especially now at such a critical time in our community, and such a difficult time. And those people really are heroes, and we're all grateful for them and their work. So just want to say that at the very beginning. So the Institute staff and teachers, within a week of us closing our shop, got our students and our classes online. And it really isn't an overstatement to say that our staff are really leaders in the state in how quickly they responded to getting people online, but also the quality in which they're doing that. So our teachers figured out quickly that Zoom was the best format for teaching, both because there's many tools you can use for teaching, but also it was most accessible and easier for our students to learn. So that was a really wise decision on their part, and has had really positive implications. So really grateful for what a great job they've done. All of our classes got online very quickly, and I'm going to talk about that more in our program updates. Also, our case management services, which are so important for people during this time, they have also been able to do a lot of their services online with folks. They set that up with their clients, so those services continue, and our staff do go to clients' homes when needed. It was easier to do in the summer when we could be outside. We're grateful for the warm weather because that's really helped, but we do go to clients' homes when we need to, and there are definitely times when it's very critical to do so. Our immigration services they're one of the programs that are using volunteers, are able to use volunteers on site. It's a handful of volunteers, but those volunteers are key to capacity. That team has been able to maintain the numbers that they served pre-COVID in the previous year, and volunteers have been critical to making that work happen. So we're really grateful for that. But we are very sad because the volunteers that we've had in the past that are so key to the capacity that we have are much more limited in this environment, because of course we are very concerned about their safety as well. So we've really had to limit those number of volunteers. So we're very eager to get back to the number of volunteers that we had previously and continue to expand that. I've been at the Institute for 30 years, as many of you know, and I would say 10 years ago, we had very few on-site volunteers at the Institute. It's been a huge culture shift, and that we have hundreds of volunteers, and we really, all of our staff are really feeling your absence at the Institute. So I can't say that enough. They talk about it all the time. And so that is one of the things that we're most excited about when we can get back in person having service. So I want to talk about some of the impact that this has had on clients. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that may not be so obvious, but we're concerned about all of our students, and our staff contacted all of our current students and previous students to make sure that they were safe, also to connect them to our services, but also to services that we don't have. We didn't want people to be left with feeling like they had no place to turn to. And, in the beginning, it was a very confusing environment. So they really did a phenomenal job of that. But we were really concerned about people that were newly arrived, and also for people that are ineligible for government services, that they either weren't connected yet to them, or they can't be connected to them because for many reasons they're ineligible. So that was our biggest concern in the beginning, and remains to be our concern. So one of the biggest examples of that is people that were laid off from their jobs and could not access unemployment benefits, which were quite a few of our clients. So we really worked hard to contact those folks, and many of them contacted us to help complete their unemployment applications. And Scarlett Shong, one of our colleagues, was not her job to do unemployment applications. She'd never done them. And she quickly learned how to do them because the demand was just off the charts. We served well over 100 people in the first probably 5 months of COVID. So it almost became her full-time job. And she really shifted to respond and then helped educate the rest of us on how we could be helpful. And we secured more AmeriCorps help to help with that work because it was so critical. So, and I think also people who were working maybe 2 or 3 part-time jobs and got laid off from those jobs, or maybe had one of those jobs, were also ineligible for unemployment assistance. So it was really important that we were able to help those folks navigate that environment as well. And then also for folks that were newly arrived to the country, and making sure that they were connected to services that they need. So that was a whole nother layer of service on top of the services that we're already doing without additional staffing in the beginning. And, but really, really critical for us to do. So one of the other key things in that work was expanding our basic needs funding. So in April, we really worked hard to raise funding for basic needs, and many people on this call helped us, donated funding so that we could have a fund to begin. And that gave us time to leverage funds elsewhere from the government, from CARES money, and from foundations. But those beginning grants that people made, or donations that people made, were key to sustain us in that time. We were really worried about how we were going to pay for staffing to help people, but also for one of the other key things in addition to unemployment was helping people stay in their apartments and in their homes. So rent and mortgage payments were critical for people's security for themselves and for their families. So, and I just want to say, to give you some scale or sense of how many people, 82% of the people that we were serving were ineligible for government supports. So those people are on the margins in pretty much every way. So we wanted to make sure that we serve those folks. And so that funding that people provided for basic needs funding was key in helping us pay for people's rent. So we helped over 214 people stay in their homes and in their apartments. And I don't have to tell this group of people who know the importance of that. And if you don't have stable housing, you can't try to get another job after you've been laid off from your job. You can't worry about your health. You can't worry about a lot of things. So that has really, really been key. So we're just very grateful to our donors, to our foundation staff, to our volunteers, and to our community who have helped us with all the families that we serve and keeping them as stable as we can. So I'm going to move now into some program highlights. I want to start with talking about our English for Work classes. So those are 3 classes that we have at beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels of classes. So serving people that have been in the country for weeks, people who have been in the country for years. So they have to respond to lots of different needs in those programs. But our English classes, those English for Work classes, have done a phenomenal job of keeping students who are very vulnerable, so limited English skills, newly arrived, engaged in those classes, and helping them with their technology needs, and I'll talk more about that. And then also our college programming, our College Readiness Academy. So both of those programs, it's pretty remarkable, have seen expanded enrollment in our classes. They already had a very robust enrollment, but because we're online now, we don't have to worry about physical constraints of space. We've been able to actually increase the numbers and serve some people that we weren't previously serving. Another exciting update in that area that's taken a lot of diligence and patience on the part of those teams is we did negotiate, they did negotiate a new agreement with Minnesota State with the community colleges that we partner with, so that students at the Institute, both in the college readiness classes and in the higher levels of our English for Work program, are going to get up to 6 college credits for free when they enter college. So, so they agreed that the work that we're doing is deserves college credit, and because it is college work, and so they've given us college credit to our students, so 6 free credits to our students in those programs, which is really great for students and a great motivator for them to think about advancing their careers and their education. I want to tell you a story when I'm going to move into talking about the Institute's medical careers pathway, which many of you have heard about, but I know we have quite a few new people on the line too. So our Institute's medical careers pathway helps people enter the medical career, usually through nursing assistant training on site that we have at the Institute. We still have it on site. And then we help people move up the pathway into higher level positions. So 2-year RN positions, 4-year RN positions are most of those advanced positions. I just want to start with a story. Brooke Antila, who is the manager of the medical career advancement part, so that higher end of the pathway, sent us all a memo last week talking about one of our students who entered the medical career advancement pathway about 4 years ago. Started as a nursing assistant, making $15 an hour in his job. And about 4 years later, he through those 4 years advanced to nursing assistant, then to a 2-year RN program, then to a 4-year RN program, accessing those services at the Institute. And he went from making $15 an hour to now just got a job in a hospital making $42 an hour. So that is a huge change for him and his family, and really gets to a wage where you can really support your family. So we hear those stories frequently at the Institute from Brooke and her team, and they're very exciting. And really, the Institute is one of the only agencies in this community who's helping people get to that level of advancement and those higher wage. And that is so important for economic stability and wealth development for new Americans. So on that note, staying with that advancement part of our pathway, we've had 49 people last year in our medical career advancement program graduate, most of them from nursing assistant positions, into those higher positions. And the majority of them are getting 4-year nursing degrees, 2-year and 4-year nursing degrees. So that is just very exciting. And the majority of them have already been graduated and been placed in jobs. And that's what's great about healthcare, is there's such demand now for employment. So there's really a short time between graduation and placement. That's very exciting. We've also placed 55 nursing assistants in long-term care jobs. So that team is doing a lot of education about how to be safe in long-term care, and because people are scared. That's a whole new element. And so our team is really talking about that with them and giving them facts, which is really helpful. But it's also important to know that 30% of all the nursing assistants in our state are new Americans. And we are very proud of that because we've contributed to that statistic. And it's so critical for our community who, by any labor measure that you look at in any industry, we have a shortage currently of folks in the labor market, and that's only going to grow. So I also just want to mention a couple other kind of key things that happened in the last year, milestones for programming. We reached 25,000 refugees that the Institute alone has resettled since we started doing resettlement in the mid 1970s. So that is very exciting. We're even though the numbers have gone down in the last 3 years dramatically, we still did reach that milestone. We also have increased our capacity for our survivors of human trafficking. We just were awarded a large Department of Justice grant at the federal level, and that's the first grant we've received from them directly. And we're very excited to expand capacity. We did serve 50 people in that program last year. And then we also served almost 49 people for unaccompanied minors. So children that came across the border, we helped to reunite them with their families here in Minnesota. Very, very important work. Our immigration services team reached a milestone of 15,000 citizenship applications, starting about 20 years ago when we started counting that. So we've really, in the last 3-4 years, had huge demand for that program and really ramped up services there. Again, from support from the community and many people on this call. So we're really, really grateful for that. Many of you have heard about the Liberians in our community, in our country. They were here in temporary protected status. And so there was some federal legislation that helped them move into a more secure status. And so that immigration team has responded to that and is really serving a lot of those folks in that program this year. All right, so that's a lot kind of to tell you and for you to digest. But one of the questions that we're hearing a lot from the community, which we appreciate, is how can you help? So we do have limitations on the amount of volunteers that we can have at the Institute. So we're very sad about that. But if you're interested in volunteering, Mahima Gupta is listed on our website, and she's our volunteer coordinator. So please feel free to reach out to her. If we can't get you connected now, we will, try to get you connected as soon as we can when we open our doors, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also in the meantime, almost all of our donors are very social media savvy. So just, liking us on Facebook and other platforms, Instagram, and then spreading that among your network. I know that gets tiresome to hear that, but it really does help us. And then we really appreciate you also just talking to friends and family about what the work the Institute does and how you're connected to that work. And we've really seen the impact of you doing that over the years. So really can't, I know it can be tiring to tell all your friends about that, but it really does have impact. And we really hear, oh, so-and-so told me about this program and about the Institute, and I want to get connected. So thank you. We really appreciate that. So I think, as you can hear in my comments, we're keeping the work that we've always done going, and some of that has grown, but we've also added a layer of service that's in response to the crisis that we're in. So that really does take additional resources to sustain that work. And so whether you can give $25,000 or you can give $25, it all matters, and it all adds up to helping us have funding that we can deploy where we need it. And that is really, really important, because much of the funding we get is restricted. It has to go for a certain thing. So your support has helped us be effective in our response to this pandemic and other crises that we face at the Institute. So we're super grateful for that. And we just want to say that every gift to the Institute matters. And we're so grateful for your support. So I just want to close with some exciting news about 2021. So as you know, we have a new administration that will be taking charge soon. And the thing I think is the most important about that, there's many things that are important, and Kellyanne's going to talk about the policy with you, but I cannot overstate the fear that the staff have seen in clients over the last 3.5 years, it's really been profound. It's affected our staff. It's really affected the people that we serve, and it's been very sad to see. So we really feel when we have administration that sees immigrants for the resource and that they are to our country, it's going to really have an impact on the way people feel and the way that they access service. So while we were concerned when the Trump administration was elected that it might impact the number of people that we serve, in fact, it hasn't. It's actually increased the number of people that we serve, but it has greatly impacted the way they feel and the fear that is in the new American community. So we really do think that's going to change quickly with a very different tone from this administration. And that is really, really important. So we welcome that in the coming months. I will think the other thing that, of course, we're very excited about is last year we resettled just over about 100 refugees. 5 years ago, that number was close to over 400, close to 500 one year. But we hope to get back to 300, 400 refugees being resettled in a year in the new administration. That might not happen right away, but it will happen fairly soon. And we're very, very excited about that. So the other thing that we're very excited about is over the years, we've had new investments made in the Institute, both in programming, but then we've had huge investments made in our capital campaign, which started about 3.5 years ago. So we did get $3 million from the state legislature in the bonding bill through their equity projects. We are really appreciative to the governor and lieutenant governor for their support for our project. And so that really boosted us to a new level. We're at about $9 million of the just over $12 million that we need to raise. And so that's allowed us to think about starting the building sooner than later. And so we're looking at doing that in starting construction in early winter. So we'll keep you posted and informed about that. But that's going to be very exciting to be able to continue to expand the capacity we have just because we were out of space and to continue to grow the work that we do. So thank you all so much for your time. Back to you, Corey.
Thanks, Jane. I next want to welcome Kellyanne Whalen. Jane previously introduced her. She is one of our policy partners and an analyst for USCRI, our national affiliate. And she's joining us today to talk a little bit more about the recommendations that USCRI is making and following with our new presidential administration. So much of the tone Jane had mentioned earlier, we expect to change. But Kellyanne's going to talk a little bit more about what else we expect to change and how quickly we expect to see that change. So thank you, Kellyanne, for joining us, and feel free to begin.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Jane, for all of your comments. It's amazing to see all the work that you've been doing despite all the circumstances. And, as you said, like it's going to be really wonderful to see at a human level the changes with the new administration. Because I think sometimes when I sit in my office in Washington, I forget kind of how this really has made people scared. And I think that's really the most important part. I mean, we want to protect people and bring them to this country, but the ones that are already here are really, that's our responsibility. And I think, it's really important to remember that. So as I like to say, I think policy, we're really just putting the gas in the car and you are really driving it and doing all the work. So thank you so much for all of the things that you're doing. It's amazing. So I think what I'm going to start with is more of just an overview of USCRI's wish list, as it were, for a new administration, because I think that's kind of important to see just really where we've been seeing a lot of issues, especially for those of you who do work in the programmatic side as well. And the areas that we really are focused on in our wish list were with human trafficking, unaccompanied children, refugees, and then unsafe migration from Latin America, which also includes asylum. So to start with human trafficking, we had 4 big asks for the administration, and the first one was really to remove the law enforcement and immigration requirements from the certification process for victims to receive benefits and services. So, I know the Institute, had worked with the Trafficking Victim Assistance Program, which is under USCRI's purview as well. It's a trafficking grant, and the way that trafficking survivors get benefits in this country is they have to comply with law enforcement requirements, meaning, in practice, this often means that they have to testify against their trafficker, and that's just not trauma-informed care at all. So we would like to see that go away. The other thing that we want to see go away is the T visa requirement. And also we would like to see the T visas for those who do want them to be processed in less than a year, because right now trafficking survivors have to wait 18 months or more, which is absolutely ridiculous. And they can't work. I mean, this is just, you're creating a system in which somebody who's already been exploited is going to be re-exploited just trying to get some relief. And that kind of goes into our next ask, which was, once somebody has applied for a T visa, we want them to be given that work authorization so they can support themselves, because right now that's just not happening. So again, that will help to stop the cycle of the re-victimization that currently happens with the US system. And then also just raising funding in general for trafficking survivors. Jane had mentioned that you received a grant from the US government, which is great. We just want to see more money put into that. As in the last couple of years, money has been put into other victim of crime grants and not this one. So we are saying, these are some of the most vulnerable, especially the foreign victims. Please raise the cap on that. So the second area we really focused on is unaccompanied children. USCRI has a shelter for unaccompanied girls in Florida. So it's a big concern for us. I know in Minnesota there's less so unaccompanied minors going all the way up there, but for us at the border, it's a big issue. We had 4 big asks, and I think the first one is really so that all children, unaccompanied children, can receive social services, and these are called post-release services, as some of you may know. And right now, they're not given to all unaccompanied children. They're just given to selective few. So really, all unaccompanied children are vulnerable. All of them should receive that assistance. We also, which is more along the lines of more relevant to the Institute as well, is that we really want to see the unaccompanied refugee minor program, the URM program, expanded, because it's been pretty minimal in the last few years. That used to be a very big program in the 80s and 90s. So we would love for that to get to be expanded, because we think that right now, especially with the situation in the camps with COVID, and also just generally, that a lot of refugee minors are being kind of swept under the rug and not included. So the other thing is that we want vulnerable children, unaccompanied children in the United States, to be given child advocates. Right now, a lot of these kids are going through their proceedings without any kind of assistance. I'm not even talking about having an attorney. This is just somebody who's advocating on their best behalf. So a lot of these children are going through the system with nobody, and that's unacceptable. The other thing, which is a more long-standing issue, which is a very wide international policy bit for us, is that the United States is not party to several United Nations conventions. And one of them is that we have not ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And one, from an international perspective, that's embarrassing for the United States, just because we are supposed to be this beacon of human rights. Secondly, it means we really have no obligation to the children in the United States that are immigrant children coming in, our own children even, and then also any countries that we're also involved in, and involved in less so now, but in armed conflict as well, meaning that the US really has no obligation to protect these children under international law as of right now, other than the refugee protocols. So that's something we'd like to see. That's a very big, wide policy, but that's on the wish list. It's kind of like a kid for Christmas. You put all these hundreds of things down, but it's always better to list them all and then be denied. So then the third area is refugees. As we all know on this call, the refugee cap has been dismal in the last 2 years, 3 years. And the current administration had said they wanted to have it at 15,000. But we were actually being a little conservative, as I'll point out later. We actually just had asked for about 110,000 because we were like, can't get too big. But actually, as I will talk about in a minute, the Biden administration has said they want to raise the cap to 125,000, which would be amazing. So we were hoping to have an increase every year. So we'll see how that goes. But that was our estimate based on the last years and then the years prior. The other thing we wanted in the refugees is USCRI for probably the past 30 years has been working on this policy. And again, this is a very broad policy issue, is something we call refugee warehousing. And what refugee warehousing is that we have refugees in many countries that are born in camps. They stay in camps for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Some of them live their entire lives in camps and they never leave. And so that's also unacceptable. And so we want to place that. We're asking the United States to place that at the top of the US human rights agenda. And what we're trying to hope for that refugee warehousing situation really is that, we need to have either a very systematic resettlement program in the host country or with an agreement with other countries, or there needs to be an integration program in which refugees can work in the host country, because right now a lot of those are just not even acceptable. And I won't even go into how little opportunities women and girls have in refugee warehousing situations, and everything that entails. So you have generations of refugees that are really just stuck in camps, not working, not able to work, not able to support themselves, not able to have a value placed on them by the government. It's really just, it's horrible. So that's a big another wide policy issue that we want to have the next administration place at the top of their agenda. The other thing that's a little bit more tangible is that the UNRWA, which is the United Nations funding for refugees in Palestine, was completely cut in 2019 and 2020. We used to be the biggest donor to that. And as a result, they've had to really cut back on a lot of their programs, education, health. The infant mortality rate has gone up as a result in Palestine, the maternal mortality rate as well. So we're really hoping that we can restore US funding to the pre-2016 level. And then I will say the last wide area is the unsafe migration from Latin America, which includes asylum. And basically with the asylum, as I'll go into in a minute, the asylum system in this country has been eviscerated by the current administration. It really has just been disemboweled. Every single protection that existed, even at a minimal level, because the asylum system, even before this administration, was quite flawed, has just been totally just totally destroyed. So really what we're hoping for is at least a restoration of all of the asylum laws that were previously available and protections for asylees to be restored. And then the other thing is to prioritize programs in Central America that actually address the systemic issues rather than just saying throwing money there and hoping that people don't migrate. And really work, and this is part of the Biden administration's plans, is actually to work with authorities in Mexico and Central America rather than just sending people back. So that's a big part of it. And then, the third thing is to definitely get rid of the migrant protection protocols, which is the remain in Mexico policy, in which people are just kept on the other side of the border waiting for asylum that never comes. So those are our big, wide wish list areas. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears slightly, and a lot of the questions that were sent to me by Corey were about what are we expecting in the crystal ball of the Biden administration. It's a very exciting time, as Jane was saying too. It's really, we're hoping it's going to be a new, fresh page. But as she also pointed out, changes will not be overnight. I was talking before the call with Corey saying it's like Narnia, where everything kind of, turns back from stone. And I wish that you could just, have a magic wand and everything would just go back to at least the way it was prior, which wasn't perfect either. But there's really a couple ways that the Biden administration will go about this. And Biden could overturn many of the guidelines using the same mechanism that Trump used to implement them, which is executive orders. Seems like we had an executive order every week. And then a lot of them will actually require more than a policy declaration, and that is more, that's through regulatory action, and that will take a lot longer because that will require notice. They will publish these rules. It will require a notice period, a comment period. Then, new regulations have to be issued. And then after that, new people will have to be installed in the agencies to implement them. Guidance manuals will have to be edited. Field manuals will have to be updated. And then plans that actually carry out what we want to do with those will have to go through. So it is nice that it's not a whole congressional legislation thing, but it also takes time. I will say from being on the policy end, it seemed like every week the administration was publishing some rule about, and usually a lot of asylum, as I was talking about, a lot of asylum rules were published, and they say, you have 30 days to comment on the fact that we are now going to charge people for asylum. Why is this wrong? And then you could go in and comment, but, and there are people that read these comments, but most of the time the administration just does what it wants. So that will be similar with Biden, hopefully in a positive note of like, let's take this away. But what we can really expect early on, I think, at least the attention to changing it will be to get rid of the travel bans. There will be attention to the DACA program. Public charge rule will also be addressed, the refugee cap, and then I think the big one, which will take a lot more time, will be the migrant protection protocols and asylum. So actually the travel ban, from what I understand from my talks with the transition team, is that within the first 100 days, Biden is expected to repeal that travel ban. And so that's really good news for quite a few nationalities, especially people who have family members there. And so initially, they obviously targeted the majority Muslim countries, but it's been expanded using a security threat excuse. So that's expected within the first 100 days. So definitely look out for that. That's good news. The second thing will be DACA. I think there's been a lot of talk around DACA this year, especially with the Supreme Court decisions. And this is fairly simple. It's a simple Band-Aid. Obviously, DACA, the problem with DACA is that DACA in itself is a Band-Aid. So putting another Band-Aid on top of DACA for the moment will at least give people relief, because right now the this administration, soon to be last administration, has said, we're not giving out any more DACA. Those who have DACA, sorry, your work authorization's being cut to a certain number of years. So really what we're hoping is that it'll be a quick fix by the president, elect president, and that will hopefully extend protection to at least not deport DACA recipients and give them back the work authorization for an extended period of time. Obviously, this is something that Congress really needs to work on. We need to figure out a long-term solution for DACA, because there is none right now. So public charge, the public charge rule, for those of you that don't know, is a wealth test, and it determines whether an immigrant is likely to rely on America's public assistance programs. So, and this rule, actually, it shocks people when I tell this. This rule's been around for about 20 years. It's only been implemented, though, by this last administration, really. So, unfortunately, with the public charge rule, it will require more than just the stroke of a pen like the other two. It will probably have to be a new regulation that goes through a notice and public comment period, but we are hoping to see that fairly quickly, just because it's a very, I would say, going back to Jane's comment about fear, it's really something that scares people, because, you get sick, you get very sick, you rely on some public assistance, and then sorry, you can't have a green card, you can't become a US citizen. It's very scary, and it stops people from getting the help that they need. And that includes, domestic abuse survivors, people in very poor health. It's got a very big reverberation through the communities. So the other thing that will be fairly quick as well is the refugee cap. So we're very excited to hear that Biden is expected to raise the cap to 125,000, which would be a great number compared to the horrible numbers we've seen. But in terms of other refugee programming and such, there's really been no other announcements as of yet, or hints from state or hints from his transition team as to whether there's going to be big changes for, refugee resettlement services and RNP and all of the rest of that. But that's more on, obviously, on that's more of, obviously, on a programmatic side, but it wouldn't surprise me if we saw more support being pushed toward refugee programming, which would be great. So then the last one really would be the migrant protection protocols and the asylum rules, which honestly, this is going to be the most difficult area of policy change that we're going to see, because this is going to take a lot of time. And as I mentioned earlier, this current administration has just absolutely disemboweled the asylum system. It's made, we have a legal services office for USCRI, as do you, as we were hearing about. And, the attorneys can even just tell you, it just makes their life so much harder, because every week there's a new regulation. Oh, you can't file this, then, and now we have limited filing deadlines. And oh, well, by the way, now you have to pay for asylum and you can't apply if you went through these countries. So it's, I could list the number of changes for you, but it would take us 2 hours. So I'm not going to, unless you really want me to nerd out, because it could. But really, it's placed us in kind of the same position as like countries like Russia who are charging for asylum. I mean, it's absolutely, I could go on about this, but anyway, there are plans under the new administration to get rid of MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocols, but it will be the most difficult, and reinstating that asylum protection will take a lot of regulatory change. It will take a lot of, and I'm assuming there will be a lot of pushback in Senate, and not so much in House, but we will see. So Biden's plans in this area are to increase the number of asylum officers to efficiently review cases, restore eligibility for domestic violence survivors, expand protections for LGBTQIA+ individuals, apply asylum laws for those fleeing political persecution, double the number of immigration judges, which is great because the backlog is incredible, end for-profit detention centers. There was a question about detention. Unfortunately, Biden is no fairy godmother. He will not, unfortunately, release everyone from detention. It is my view that most people in detention should not be in detention, and I think that's been obvious when they've released non-violent and also people with no criminal convictions from detention centers, and there's been no issue. But the one good thing is that the for-profit detention centers will go away, and the ones that are not for profit, the standards will be improved there, and the prolonged detention, the like interminable detentions, those will go away, is the plan. And he will reinvent a case management system that allows people to be supported out of their as they are transferred out. And it's really unclear what will be done with the current migrants in detention, but at least it's not going to be prolonged detention. So
Kellyanne, we
that
have
is
to
it.
we have to start wrapping up
That's
here.
it. That's it. That's all I had.
That's what I thought.
I didn't. Yeah, that's all I have. I didn't answer the 2 specific questions I had left, but that's fine. Go for it.
There are a few remaining questions, and I think just for the interest of time today, we'll work on answering some of those questions offline and do that as part of our follow-up. I failed to mention earlier today that we were recording this session, and so we will be sure to publish this so that if you want to share it or want to view it again, that you have the opportunity to do that. If you've registered for today's session, we'll go ahead and send you a follow-up following today. Any other final questions can be entered into the chat box now, and we will be sure to follow up at another time. We did have one question here that we might be able to answer quickly, and Kellyanne, I don't know this is your area of expertise, but there's the new harder citizenship test, right, for citizenship eligibility. Do you anticipate that to change with the new administration? That was one of our final questions.
I'm just going to add to that, Kellyanne. Sorry. If
Go
you could
for it.
make a final comment. A lot of people had questions about immigration reform, which is a huge question. So if there's any talk about that in the transition team.
With like legal immigration.
This total immigration reform bill.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so for the first question with the citizenship test, they actually have not addressed that. I think they're more concerned with the humanitarian protection problems right now, but I will say that that's fairly simple to change. That's again just a regulation. That's a regulatory thing. That's not anything that has to go through legislation. As far as the immigration reform, they also have not really addressed that very much. I think they're so concerned about the fact that asylum and all the humanitarian stuff has just completely been destroyed. So I'm sure that they will, but you know, more to come.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Everyone, we really appreciate your time and joining us today. We hope we answered as many questions as we could. And again, feel free to send us a chat and we'll try and do our best to follow up after today's presentation. As always, feel free to visit our website for more information on how to volunteer at the Institute, ways that you can be involved in helping our organization. This is a long game. We know this work takes years and decades, and with all of your support and the opportunities that we have in the future, we know that we can continue to be a place that new Americans can turn to at any point in their lives in the United States. And we appreciate the community support that makes this possible. In the future, I think our next breakfast circle in a couple more months is actually going to be talking a little bit more about our capital campaign and our building expansion. So we hope that you will join us all again at that time. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we will do our best to follow up in an email following this presentation today. So with that, I want to thank Kelly Ann for joining us. We appreciate your time and sharing all of your expertise with us. And Jane, thank you as always for joining us and being such a great leader for this organization.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to close today's